So the other day I was participating in an SCTC, that Society for Communications and Telecommunications Council, bi-weekly conference call when the presenter asked a pretty simple question. How many of you have heard the term cloud repatriation? Now for myself, I've spent more than 40 years in telecommunications, public safety, networking, enterprise communications, and overall technology architecture. And when I heard that, I raised my hand mentally and said, cloud what? Well, apparently I wasn't alone, as out of over 35 people on the call, well over 2/3 had also never heard the term either. Now, that's unusual. You see, most technology buzzwords arrive with enough marketing momentum that makes sure everyone hears about them whether they want to or not. Cloud computing, virtualization, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, zero trust, and even edge computing. Love them or hate them, you've probably heard them. Cloud repatriation, however, seemed to arrive kind of quietly. Yet the more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't something obscure or a technical term. In fact, it describes something that many organizations are already doing. And as public safety is a laggard in technology terms, with a limited budget, by paying attention to trends, they can save themselves a lot of pain, aggravation, and money. So what is cloud repatriation? Well, the most simple definition is this. Cloud repatriation is the process of moving applications, workloads, data, or services from a public cloud environment back into a privately controlled infrastructure. In other words, an organization that previously moved systems into the cloud has decided to bring some of those systems back home. Think about it like this. For years, the technology industry has been telling organizations the following: move everything to the cloud. And that's because the cloud providers have promised lower costs, ultimate scalability, improved reliability, reduced complexity, and faster innovation. And in a lot of cases, those promises were absolutely true. Many organizations migrated their applications to public cloud providers like Amazon Web Services or AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. Now, while some companies moved a few workloads, others moved nearly everything. But after living in the cloud for several years, many of those organizations began asking an uncomfortable question. Are we actually saving any money here? And it's that question where cloud repatriation begins. Where'd this term come from? Now, the word repatriation traditionally means returning something to its country of origin. I've heard the term before in business where it's used when assets, manufacturing operations, or even people return to their original location. And I guess technology borrowed that same concept. Cloud repatriation simply means returning computing resources back home from the cloud infrastructure where the network is owned or directly controlled by the organization. Now, the term actually started gaining visibility back in the late 2010s as several large technology companies publicly discussed their plans to move portions of their workloads out of the public cloud environments. And really what surprised a lot of people was who was doing it. They weren't the small companies struggling with technology. No, some of the most sophisticated technology organizations in the entire world began selectively moving workloads back into private infrastructure. But it wasn't because the cloud had failed. It was because they had learned where the cloud worked exceptionally well and where it didn't. Wait a second, I thought the cloud was the future. Well, don't worry, it is. And that's the interesting part. Cloud repatriation is not an anti-cloud movement. Nobody's rolling back the clock to 2005. Nobody's trying to say public cloud is a bad idea. No, what organizations are discovering is that the answer isn't always cloud everything. Instead, the answer is increasingly becoming cloud the right things. You see, there are certain workloads that are almost perfect candidates for public cloud environments. Others may perform better, cost less, or provide greater control when they're operated in privately managed infrastructure. So in many ways, the industry's moving away from ideology and back towards practicality. Why this is happening now. Now, several factors are driving this conversation. The first is the cost surprise. Cloud adoption is often easy, but cloud optimization is much harder. Many organizations have discovered that while spinning up services in the cloud was simple, understanding the long-term operating costs was not. Storage costs, data transfer costs, and compute costs. Then you've got licensing costs, backup costs, and replication costs. A lot of times that monthly bill can become much larger than expected. And then artificial is changing the math. Artificial intelligence is accelerating the trend. Training models and processing large volumes of data can absolutely consume enormous computing resources. And that's causing some organizations to begin asking whether some AI workloads make more financial sense on infrastructure that they own and operate directly. Another factor is something called data gravity. You see, the larger a data set becomes, the harder and more expensive it becomes to move it. Eventually, applications tend to move closer to where the data already lives, and this is starting to create very interesting architectural decisions about what belongs in the cloud and what belongs elsewhere. Another thing that public safety agencies need to consider as the use of AI expands and their data sets grow to enormous levels. And then some organizations simply want more control, more predictability in monthly costs, predictable performance, and predictable governance. And in highly regulated industries, like public safety, they may want to direct specific oversight of the infrastructure that supports the critical operations. And this is the important part, why public safety should pay attention. Now, this is where this conversation becomes really interesting. Public safety agencies have spent years discussing how cloud-hosted applications affect them. Cloud CAD, cloud call handling, cloud analytics, cloud storage, and cloud-based NG911 components. Now, some of these services provide tremendous value, but public safety communications has always had a unique requirement. And this is something the new guys kind of forget. Predictability matters. When a citizen dials 911, nobody wants to hear, "The cloud region is experiencing elevated latency today. Please stand by." Now, mission-critical services demand different design considerations than a traditional enterprise application. Now, it doesn't mean that public cloud is wrong. It means architects must carefully evaluate which workloads belong where. The future may not entirely be cloud-based. It's probably not entirely on-premise either. No, the future is going to be a very delicate, carefully balanced combination of both technologies. The bottom line. So what struck me most during that SCTC discussion wasn't the definition. That was the realization that many experienced telecommunications professionals had never heard the term despite already seeing the trend. Cloud repatriation sounds like a new buzzword. In reality, it describes a natural evolution of technology strategy. The commercial industry has spent the last decade asking the question, can we move it to the cloud? But the next decade may be defined by a different question. Where should it actually live? And that's what might be one of the most important architecture decisions and discussions that we'll have over the next several years. This topic is certainly not over, and public safety would do itself a favor by paying attention now as they're in the midst of evolving their networks. And they don't want to go here and then have the industry say, "What are you doing over there? We're all here." That wraps up this episode of TiPS Today in Public Safety. I hope you found this topic interesting and relevant. Be sure to follow me on social media and subscribe for more details. This is Fletch. Thanks for listening, and if you're in public safety, thanks for what you do every single day. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
You've been listening to TiPS Today in Public Safety, your go-to podcast for today's breaking stories and public safety news. Hosted by Fletch and available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Catch past episodes on 911tips.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to join us each week for the latest on NG911. I am Spider Harrison, the official 911 voiceover dude. Catch me on Sirius XM on various channels, including 99 on 9 to 10 spot and on the weekend countdown on Hits 1. Or don't regret it for the rest of your life. Either way, I'm good.